One of the areas I want to get into right now, and I didn't get into last time, was the whole aspect when we form children. In the past, I've already covered areas of where we form them in their mission and what they do. We talked about their identity, but I thought I would leave a certain segment, this one, for their journey. Now, as I speak of a man's development often, which there's complete parallel for women, I do mission, identity, and journey. What does that mean? Mission, what do you do? Identity, who are you? And journey, how you live out your life. So again, for a man, leader, protector, provider, priest, prophet, and king. For his mission, for his identity, beloved son, loyal brother, vital man, devoted husband, strong father, and veteran sage. Now I want to talk about a journey. Now I say, and I give 6 categories out the gate, which I find basically, how would I say, surround 6 pillars of a man's journey. But it's much more complicated, I think, than a man's mission and his identity. So I would say, though, what I propose as 6 core through which other parts of his journey gravitate around, I would say they're exploration, initiation, testing, then resolution, then combat, and glory. Again, this is much more complicated than mission and identity. There's so much to say. In fact, it's hard. I've only got cursory notes in front of me. In fact, on that subject, I have got none other than what I've just told you and just mentioned. But let's see it analogously. Well, not analogously, but first and through the lens of a man, and then and how that equals with a woman. Because I'm talking about principles of raising children generally. Now, as I say, a man, what I always attribute to a man, his formation, to start out with exploration. And what I mean by that, when we think about this, we think that, men, they need to explore new lands and, go out and see and all the rest. And all of us men, we all romanticize about what it is to go out in society, or rather to hit the ocean seas in a ship, or to explore on foot and just to see the world. And what a parent needs to do with their children, they need to expose them to different environments. And that's why it's important to get out of the house. In fact, most of a child's life, other than it's sleeping, but it's day hours, most of a child's day hours should ideally be had outside, not inside. Obviously, properly covered and kept safe, right? We don't want people out in cold or harshly warm circumstances. But it's important they experience that. It's important, especially with children. You learn through touch. And so when children have contact with natural things, natural objects, even their feet touching the grass educates them. Touching the trees, they learn too how not to touch certain plants, right, with thorns and whatnot. But there's so much to learn in nature. Nature's our teacher. The senses are how we gain our intelligence. All the intelligence is gathered through the senses. And I won't go through that philosophically, but that's how our intellects are formed, is through the senses initially, and sense perceptions. So when a child has more sense perceptions and more experiences in that realm, then it can have more of a universal knowledge and more well-developed knowledge through which all of its further understanding of things and wisdom is based. And so I just find that very, very important to give children the right amount of exploration in nature. In fact, I have a theory too. I have a feeling that if children don't experience this enough when they're growing up, that journey or that feeling of desiring exploration, exploring new lands, gets a little bit frustrated. And so this is what happens even in marriage. Sometimes if there's not sufficient of exposure to the world, then that can leave one, male and female, both unsettled. Mostly male than female, I think. But after exploration, parents have to discern what I would call the phase of initiation for children. What I mean by initiation is males and females both need to be initiated in certain experiences and certain skills and certain aptitudes. What was interesting, my father probably started me out a little bit early when I was a kid, because I knew how to wield a hammer when I was 6. And I was literally pounding in shingles on a roof when I was 7 years of age. Now that may be a little precocious. I even knew how to use, my father had me using a skill saw, electric skill saw, even when I was about 9 years of age. But these things actually come back to me with actually great and fond memory. And there's certain things of work and labor and skill sets that we learn. Now, some people emphasize a lot of times what it is to play an instrument. And I do believe people should be initiated into music. That's true. And they should be obviously initiated into sports because those are kind of a healthy area of development, which I believe mean a little bit more for a man than for a woman. But they're in some way, that interplay, that physical interplay, is a vital part of human development, male and female both, and even to develop certain aptitudes that are proper to each. But it's initiation that parents have got to figure, and they've got to ask themselves, hey, what are the things my children need to be initiated? And a lot of times parents fall short in certain things about this. In fact, they may forget about that and overemphasize even just sports or overemphasize even just their school performance. But no, there's a whole number of things which a child needs to be initiated in, and then even in adolescence to be initiated. And so in adolescence to actually be becoming an adult. And so in this initiation process, parents need to discern, well, what does that really look like for the full development of the human person? Now, we could go into many different areas, and there will be many different opinions here, and I have plenty of mine. But one of the ways I think a parent can discover what these healthy areas of initiation are, when they just search their own hearts and souls, what they wish they would have been initiated in, or go back to their own mindsets. I did learn this from my dad, and I did learn this, and I did learn that. And so, but I didn't learn this, and I should have learned that. And I was mad that I didn't learn this. So if a parent puts together the things that they wish they would have gone through, in their own mind, then they know what they need to bestow upon their children. It's so important, the raising of children, that a parent be able to connect with the journey they had in being raised and at being peace with it. If there's something unreconciled in the journey with parenthood, with your being a son or a daughter, in the journey of being parented, then that will show up in your own parenting. It will eventually. And in fact, it come back even stinging. And so that's why people need to be healed if there are certain wounds in their childhood as a result of parental wounds. And even to the extent of with their other brothers and sisters too, if there's still animosities there. If those aren't really healed, those are going to show up when parenting your own children. But what's interesting after that, I would say there's a stage of testing. Now, the stage of testing is in some way complicated in the sense of there's different ways to be tested. Now, it's interesting. A man sometimes thinks he's tested when he wins a trophy or he gets his driver's license or he gets his high school diploma. And I believe those are tests. Those really are. For men, there's tests of certain types of initiation and certain types of achievements that they often need to fulfill. And so traditionally men used to have tests of manhood either found through the combat arts or in nature, or a combination of both, or in fact what they used to be able to build and construct. And I really believe by the time a boy is a man, he should know generally the principles of building a home, at least generally, if not specifically. And so a woman should have all skills appropriate also to being mother. She should find herself being actually tested in these things, that she does take a domain of control of a home or whatnot, even at an earlier age, and learn how to govern it, because we must be tested in things. Now, one of the reasons it's important for men is simply because for a man, when he's tested, he gains confidence. For us men, there's something about knowing that we've made it to a certain level that we can be secure in, and now we just aim for that next level, right? And yes, for some men, they never really stop, right? Sometimes men think, well, it'd be great when I start this business, but they start it and they do well, then they think about the next business, or what they could do to perfect that business, or branch out. And so for some men, they can't stop. In fact, I know a man in his 90s who wants to build another golf course. He just can't stop. He just wants to keep building. And so in some way, that's good, because It shows the journey of perfection. It shows a journey of goals, and all men need to have that for maturity. That's somewhat what testing gives a man. That's why I think it's so important. Now, it could be such too that men can be so preoccupied with what it is to test. In fact, any of these areas, a man could be frustrated in his own development and never really have those fulfilled in his life. So I can go into that, but that would be a little bit extensive and a little bit, there'd be too many parts of that to uncover. But again, if a man doesn't have exploration going out in the world, if he doesn't have enough initiation to skills, if he isn't really tested properly, then in some way those dynamics will be frustrated within him and he'll want to continually live those out in his life. And he must be settled in them too, because one of the problems if a man isn't, then he's going to actually almost impose upon his wife her cooperation in him achieving these things, and that's not healthy. Now, of course, a man works forward with his band of brothers, and he's somewhat, even when he's an adult, and every man should, generally speaking, be part of a band of brothers, which for most men should happen naturally. I understand there's men's groups that they get together now, and that's good. The problem is those groups should happen naturally between brothers amongst each other, between neighbors, church groups, things like that. That's really where brothers need to be formed. It gets a little fictitious when we try to form these artificial groups, unless we're trying to reach certain objectives, maybe spiritual objectives or whatnot. But I don't want to go too far afield here. And so in formation, we should form men to get together in maturity and women to get together in maturity after they've been tested and whatnot. So again, going on, there's something I find very important in the forming of children generally, and that is you form children for a moral outlook in life, and you form them for a certain kind of, and I'll use the word right character or righteous character or good character. And so there's a vision every parent has of what right character should be. Now, all a parent can do is form for that right character, right? They can't form for another person's view of right character. They have to form for what they think is right character. And so in good conscience, they have to form their children to do that, or to perform that, or to be that character they want them to be. Now, what's important, though, is when they form them, as I say in that fourth category of journey, form them for resolution. Now, what I mean by that is when you form for character, the parent just isn't about forming for the kind of things they want their children to learn and do. But that formation is also for the sake of forming them such that whatever character that parent forms their child to be, they also form the child to be resolute on maintaining that character. One of the things I find happening is, now this gets very complex because it's very, very hard to explain. And this is something every parent has to try to in some way figure out for themselves. But it's important because you just don't want to form your children with certain habits for certain character and leave them without desiring that and wanting to fulfill that and to complete that the rest of their lives. You form for life. You just don't form to be 18 or 19 or 20, right? You form for life. So you form with this vision for character and form such that the child holds on to these ideals, believes they're good, right, and true, and wants to maintain them. And so to form a child for resolution, I believe, is vital in human development. And it's important, too, because when the going gets rough, when the chips are down, when tragedies happen, and you know what hits the fan, men and women both need to be resolved about the character they've been formed to uphold. It's so vital. Every human being, if there's not a resolution, like a conviction within them to sustain that right character which they've been formed in, then it's going to be otherwise hard to maintain that character for the rest of their life, especially when things get difficult. On that fifth level, again, speaking in the general character developments we want to ensure and imbibe in children. The fifth level is what I call combat. Now, what I mean by that is you form for hardship. Men understand combat analogies all the time. That's how we think. We think in combat. Mowing the lawn is combat. Fixing my car, the engine's combat. It's almost, broken engine's like an enemy to be overcome. So we think of sports as combat, obviously. So not to overemphasize the use of combat language to the detriment of how a woman may understand things, but we must be formed for hardship. We must be formed for challenge. We must be formed to be, or in the events that we are challenged by others and opposed by others. And so there's a struggle in life, there's strife, there's hardship. And we need to expect that. It's always expected in life. When I deal with men, it's interesting. Myself, I fall into this all the time, is that when I think about things and the things I try to accomplish, there's always this vain thinking. Oh, wouldn't it be great? I worked really hard, and all of a sudden I'm going to get to this level, and everything's just going to ease, and I'm just going to taper off, and everything's going to hit this plateau, and it won't be so hard anymore. I'll have the hard things behind me. It's almost as though men think a lot about human reality in terms of in terms of boot camp, where boot camp becomes the most important, or rather, overcoming boot camp is some kind of ideal by which a man thinks he has the hardships all behind him, and now he could look forward to the ease of what it is to now be some kind of officer or settled soldier or something like that. But that is not human reality. So again, I can't overemphasize enough the importance of forming for combat, for forming for challenge, for forming for adversity. It's interesting. One of the things that parents always must keep in mind is that they must educate their children in challenge even from the very beginning. Because for a child to be formed, adversity comes out the gate. And even for men, I find that even more so than women, it's important that they face certain challenges of the tough hikes, of tough things, to form them for rigor. Because when the challenges do come and they have to face them, they're much easily overcome. So exploration, initiation, testing, resolution, combat, and finally glory. It's important, I believe, that when a parent forms a child, that they see a certain completeness and validate that child, because every man needs to hear from his father, "Son, you're a man now. You are everything a man should be." In the same way, a mother should say that to a daughter, or even a father to a daughter. "My daughter, honey, you are everything a woman should be. You are now a complete grown woman." That final affirmation must be given to the child. Now, in that final affirmation, it isn't just something fictitious by which you're saying because they need to hear it, but it's a reality by which you form them in. Whatever the vision of parenthood and what you wish children eventually become, that needs to be in some way, I won't necessarily use the word formulated, but must be established and determined. And so you actually aim for that. So you can say to your child someday, you are a fully grown man, you are a fully grown woman. And so the words are not enough. And so the vision must be formed. And what happens is, glory is given or is imparted or is realized when a male becomes everything a man should be, and a woman becomes everything a woman should be. And so in this way, there's a certain glory of development that person, male or female, has become exactly what they were meant to be. And of course, that's what you form for your children. Whatever the vision, it should be what you believe your children must become. And when they are formed in that, there's a certain glory realized in them. And you are a man now. You are a woman. Now that glory isn't for them. It's not for their own pride. That glory should be something which is given back to the community, and it's giving back to God. So it's ultimately God who we give glory, and forming children to be well-adjusted, mature men and women husbands and wives, to form that for that is an objective that every parent should have for their own children. And that's an objective to form them for what they believe God has designed them to become. And again, I call that stage glory because that's the highest thing and the highest purpose we're here for. It's not about ourselves. It's about God first, others second, and ourselves third. So the glory we realize in all of this process of parenting ultimately is for God, and rendering it in some way by forming your children to what you believe God intended is a way of honoring God and giving glory to Him. But you want a child that's able to glorify God. In the same way, that glory to the fully formed man and the fully formed woman gives a certain glory in the community. Because now the community has something which will be edified and built up and made even stronger. So that glory in the person, that full accomplishment, that full actualization, or the actualization of fullness or complete manhood and womanhood is so important. Because it shows glory for not just for oneself out the gate, but ultimately that glory of oneself, a fully formed human being, should be pointing ultimately to God and then for the good of others.